It's Monday, December 4th, and I don't know what to talk about today, so I've come up with a ridiculous premise. I thought about just turning on the camera and just talking until I ran out of things to talk about, but I realized that the only thing I want to talk about is how frustrated I am with dealing with insurance to fix the roof at my house. And then I realized that I don't want to talk about that because I'm frustrated about it, and I would rather talk about something happy. And then I couldn't think of anything happy, which is not to say that my life isn't happy. I just couldn't think of anything at this moment that I thought YouTube would find interesting that I wanted to talk about. So instead, I'm going to read you a backstory I once wrote for a role-playing character that I once played for an unfortunate short period of time. But I am going to start doing RPGs again. I'm actually going to start one up quite soon on actually this coming Wednesday. So you guys will get to see that as we journey through Dungeons and Dragons together. So I'm going to read you this story. This is a backstory for a character named Jet, who is definitely a revenant, which means like a zombie, like somebody brought back to life. But I don't necessarily remember much else about this character as far as like actual game mechanics, but I kept this backstory. Are you ready? Do you fear death? The large man looms over the huddled figure on the floor. The young elf looks at him with terrified eyes. She's wearing noble garments, but they are torn. The man is dressed in all black, and he levels a sword at her throat. What do you fear? Nothing, I whisper. The man spins to face me, but before he can make a full rotation, my blade has sent his head tumbling from his shoulders. It hits the floor with a concussive thunk as I sheathe my sword. The elf looks up at me, surprise plain on her blood-spattered face. I don't wait to hear her words. I catch the body of the man as he falls and lower it to the ground. I pull a raven feather from my pocket and slam it into the man's heart, marking him for the Raven Queen. Without a word, I spin and exit the room. I am far away by the time the elf regains her wits and calls for the guards. For the last year, almost every day of my life has gone pretty much the same. Each morning, I awake to the incessant pecking of a raven. The bird leaves me a feather and a note with nothing more than a name and a place. Each day, I go to that place and I kill that person. I used to wonder why I was killing these people, but I've long ago given up on asking. It would seem that when someone brings you back from the dead, they feel they own you. Of course, I'm more than happy to bide my time. When I came gasping back to life a year and a half ago, it was to see a wrinkled face the color of a walnut. The little old woman it belonged to told me her name was Bree, and that it was her job to care for me. She patted my head in that warm way old women have, and then she left. My body felt strange, stretched and sore, and I lay there on the bed trying to pull together my thoughts, remember what had happened. The one thing I knew for sure was that I had been dead. I still felt mostly dead. That's when he showed up. When he appeared from the shadows, I was sure it was magic. Of course, I would later learn it was simply a trick of light and shadow and a cloak. He's wearing leather armor head to toe, tall boots, gloves, and that cloak. All of it the deep black of a lake bed. He threw down the cowl of his cloak, and I saw he was a human with dark hair cropped close and bright blue eyes. Before I'd really registered his presence, there was a blade at my throat. And thus my assassin training began. He never asked for my name or gave me his. I called him simply the teacher. He spoke very little, but taught me much. I learned the art of stealth, the finesse of deception, the beauty of lies, and the importance of having a weapon that flows like part of your being. He also taught me the magic of shadows and how to make them come alive. When I chose the full blade as my weapon, he was shocked. But after I sliced a practice dummy in two with one swing, he let me keep it. For 6 months, I rehearsed killing over and over, until one day a raven came. I never read that first message, but Bree told me it was from those who brought me back. She told me that they felt I was ready and they required my services. Teacher gave me a name, a place, and a raven's feather. In a rare show of affection, he wished me well and gave me a charm. It's a piece of flowing black glass. He said it was a shadow captured and frozen, and it would bring me luck. Neither of them would tell me who I was working for, only that they needed me to kill. That first kill is etched into my mind forever. The man's name was Hennessy, a dwarf merchant I found in a small fishing village. I watched him all day and saw how he treated those around him. I can't say I was sad to separate his head from his shoulders. I remember the look of surprise on his face, frozen there by death. I remember the two distinct thunks as the halves of his body hit the floor. I remember the slight resistance of skin and muscle as I plunged the feather into his chest. I remember the splash of blood that traced a red brushstroke on my cheek, a brushstroke I had inked red that very night. I remember facing myself in the mirror that evening. I thought I would feel guilty or disgusted or sad, but I felt nothing. The face that stared back at me from that mirror was not one I recognized. The pale skin and sunken features, like a skeleton barely covered in human skin. Eyes the silver of a mirror with points of crimson. The hair falling down to my shoulders was white when I woke, but I got it dyed. Only the scales at the end of my arms and legs, the claws on my fingers and toes were vaguely familiar, and even those were the wrong color. Bree told me when I awoke that I wouldn't remember my old life. She said the Raven Queen had brought me back at the quest of her masters, that they had prayed for me and the Raven Queen had heard their prayers. She told me that in my past life I was a human named Amira, a condemned murderer. She said I'd killed many in cold blood, but had seemed repentant at the end. That I was given this second chance to bring the guilty to their fate, to bring those marked for death to the Raven Queen. She lied. Because I did remember my past life. From the instant I awoke, I remembered it all, and it was not as Bree had said. I was a dragonborn of old blood, blue and full of ice. I had been a warrior, a champion of the people. I led them into battle, full blade in hand. I had killed, certainly, but only when necessary on the fields of battle. I remembered the people I fought for, and those I fought against. But more than that, I remembered him. He's the reason I'm here. I wasn't sure if my masters made up the story believing I wouldn't remember, or if they actually expected Amira to be the soul brought back to life. Now, I know it's the latter. The Raven Queen, through some design I have yet to fully understand, brought me to them instead. She brought me, and she gave me my memories, and she made sure I knew I was hers first. I remember the first assignment I got without a raven's feather. A young noble boy, no more than 10. I asked Bree about the lack of a feather, but she told me that she knew nothing of the feathers anyway. I watched the boy all day, but when it came time to end his life, I couldn't do it. I sat there on the sill of his bedroom window for hours, just watching him sleep. I'd seen his heart, and it held no darkness. And something about not having a feather really bothered me. So I waited, and the night passed. Just before dawn, as I sat still thinking on the sill, she appeared. The Raven Queen wore a long black dress, and raven's wings sprouted strong and black from her shoulders. She swirled into existence from the shadowed corner of the boy's room. She placed a gentle hand on the boy's forehead as he slept, and then came to my window. "Why have you not killed the boy?" Her voice was soft like the rustle of feathers. "Because he is neither sick nor full of darkness. If it is your wish to claim him, such as these, then raise another to do it." "You are mine to command. I could make you." Her voice remained soft, but there was a hardness to it. I glanced out the window behind me to the streets far below. "It's a long fall from this window, and I do not fear death." "Kill the boy. Those are your orders." Her voice was sharp like talons. Without hesitation, I dropped backwards and fell from the window. There was a flurry of motion and the rustle of feathers. Suddenly, I found myself not on the cobblestones below, but held in strong, warm arms. The Raven Queen and I flew through the sleeping town to a small alley. She set me gently on my feet, and when I looked up, it was to see her smiling. "You've passed my test, child. Know that though I brought you back at the request of men, you are mine. Do not trust what they tell you. Kill only those I mark. Let them believe they have you. We shall speak again when fate decides." With that, she vanished into shadow, and I haven't seen her since. I followed her instructions, killing those she marked and pretending to kill the others. I often worried that I would be found out, but it seemed my masters were unaware. I believed them fooled, until they sent me after him. It was that day when I finally began to realize who I had been working for. When I learned that I had been raised from the dead to destroy what I had died to protect. When I finally decided to take my fate into my own hands. When I saw his name on the paper that morning, my heart stopped. Doran the Paleheart, written in the same curved script as the others, except that this name wasn't anything like the others. This wasn't a stranger I knew nothing about. This was Rin. Since I'd woken, I'd worked hard not to think of Rin. I'd even avoided asking the date. I didn't know how long I'd been dead. It could have been days or it could have been centuries. I didn't know if he'd survived the attack that killed me or lived on. I couldn't face the idea that he'd lived out a life while I was dead, so I never asked. But now it seemed I was destined to find out. I almost cried when I saw him. It seemed like he hadn't aged at all. I'm sure there were a few scars I didn't recognize, but there was no doubt it was Rin. I spent the entire day trying to find a time to speak to him, but it seemed like he was always surrounded. Soldiers, noblemen, farmers, and one particularly attractive female high elf floated around him all day, giving reports and asking advice. I was forced to watch him from the shadows until well after nightfall. Eventually, he retired to a room above one of the inns, and it was there that I made my move. He pulled a blade on me the instant I resolved from the shadows. "Who are you? Get away from me. I'll fight you off." His voice was solid and his sword steady. "You can put that away. If I meant you dead, you would not be standing here right now. I wish only to talk." "What could you possibly have to speak to me about, corpse?" I looked down at his words and took in my appearance. In my happiness at seeing Rin, I'd almost forgotten what I'd become. Of course he wouldn't recognize me like this. I looked nothing like myself. "There's much I want to tell you, but we haven't the time. Here's what you must know. I was hired by a group of men to kill you. They are the same men who fight you in battle now. They want you dead, but I work for a higher fate. The Raven Queen has not yet marked you for death. I beg you to run. Get away from them. Keep yourself safe." "And why would you care about what happens to me? I'm not going to give up on this fight, on those people, just because they send an assassin. My twin sister died to protect them. She gave her life because she believed in our fight, and I'm more than ready to do the same." Somehow I knew you'd say that. "They will know I failed to kill you. Fight the good fight, and please, be safe, Rin. For me." I ducked around his blade and planted a gentle kiss on his cheek. He stared at me in shock and grabbed my arm when I turned to leave. I turned back to him. His eyes searched my face. "The only person who called me Rin was my sister. Misha? Is that you?" "Perhaps once, but now I am Jet, assassin of the Raven Queen." I shook loose from his grasp and leapt to the window edge. "Wait! Don't go, Misha! I've missed you so much! Please stay!" "That I cannot. They will know who I am now. I've discovered who they are, and there's no more hiding. Perhaps we shall see each other again." Without another word, I dropped to the street below. I knew that if I stayed, I wouldn't have been able to leave. Rin was my twin, my other half, and it tore me up to leave him. But sometimes you must make sacrifices. Now I know the men who raised me. Now I know their true intentions. Now I know I must do anything I can to stop them, which is why I'm here. I journeyed to the Underdark because I heard whispers of a man who could help me. A man who knew those well connected and how to sever those connections. A man who could free me from my masters. A man whose name I received on a piece of parchment with a raven feather. I'm pretty proud of that backstory, actually. I feel like it has a lot of good dramatic action and just like enough intrigue to make you interested. I'm interested. I sort of want to write more of Jet's story in general, and it's maybe something I should go back to revisit. Obviously, I would need to sort of extract her from being so ingrained in the Dungeons and Dragons world, but it might be worth doing. So I hope you enjoyed me reading a story. Maybe that's something I'll do more often if I get comments that people liked it. Otherwise, I'll see you tomorrow.